You've woken up, you arrived, so that's all good. Hello, how are you?
Good morning, Mr. David. I'm just tired today.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think we all are today. Andrew, you all right?
Hello, Mr. David. I'm doing fine, thank you.
Oh, good. I'm trying desperately not to look at this device today because, in case you are wondering, all right,
So I'm on the exact same site.
yeah, 16 to 13 at the moment. Well, it still baffles me because, according to this, it's 5,600,000 votes for Trump and 5,700,000 for Biden. I don't know, how do you get 5 million people to vote for you when you are, well, a nutcase, you know? I find that quite, anyway, a little bit concerning, but okay. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to continue on. Now, remember I said the other day that your third lesson this week, which is Thursday, which is tomorrow, is going to be your IA day, so an IA lesson. So you'll need to prepare for that, all right? You'll need to have materials ready for your IA Commentary 3 if you're going to be writing that at the time. You'll want to have your Commentary 1 and 2 ready if you're having those. If you're making changes to those, have it mapped out what you're going to be doing. Have a plan for your Commentary 3 if there are particular questions that you're wanting to ask me or for me to go through with you about your IAs. Have those perhaps noted down, have them written out, so that you're going to be able to remember them during the session. So otherwise it'll be, oh, I was supposed to ask, you know. Okay. In any case, let's move on. Let's have a wee look at Nearpod. Right, I should have put these things up. I apologize, I have not put the link in. I shall put it up. Ready, it will come now. TMXZ6. TMXZ6. I will post it to the classroom just in case we have any technical issues. All right, so that you can see it as well. All right, TMXZ6. All right, Nearpod. Food. All right. And as per normal, it usually appears, it does appear in the top left-hand corner. So we'll get rid of that. And TMXZ6. And we've got people spilling in already, so that's fantastic. All right, so balance of payment structure. Now, I've made a slight alteration to this, okay? Let's see who we got here. We've got everybody getting there. All right, I've made a ever so slight alteration to this, but it doesn't, not big in the grand scheme of things, but I will explain. All right, so we had a discussion about the different account structures. We had a look at what they look like, the net errors and omissions idea. All right, here was the current account. We talked about how the current account had the trade in goods or the balance on goods, a balance on services, a balance on investment, or if you like, a balance on income, dependent on which way around you refer to it, and a balance on transfers. All right, so when I was at university, it used to be BOG, BOS, BOI, and BOT. Right, that way I could have like a code to help me remember all of the individual components, all of the individual balances within the current account. All right, and that way, if you're talking about, say, just the trade balance, then you can look at the trade here in goods and services and just do BOG and BOS. Of course, when I was at school, we didn't even call them goods and services necessarily. We called them visibles and invisibles. All right, where your goods were called visibles because they were physical and tangible. All right, you could touch them. So we had a balance on visibles, and then services were classified as invisible, all right, because you couldn't physically touch them. So they were classified in the old days as the balance on invisibles. So again, it depends. The language has changed over time, and it is unfortunate, and I'm old enough to remember the old days. But if you're looking through old textbooks or past papers or news articles, you might find slight variances in what words they use. All right? If it is at all confusing to you when you find case studies, for example, or you find past papers and you're not sure, you can ask. All right? And I'm happy to tell you. But in general, these are the terminologies that we use these days. So it's a balance on goods, a balance on services. We're going to do a bit more of a dive into them in a minute. A balance on investment or a balance on income, depending on which way you like to refer to that, and a balance on transfers. And that's all within the current account. Now, the language that we discussed was this idea here about having a deficit and a surplus. I think we went through this the other day, yes?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep, cool. So we're all right with deficits and surpluses?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. So I can move on from there. Now, here's the change I have made. So apologies if this means you need to change a little aspect in your note. Again, because language, the terminology in the language has evolved over time, this account used to be called the capital account. It is now called the financial account, and apologies for that. All right, that's what happens when you grab old resource and go, oh, this will do, chuck it in. All right, and then I'm doing it and I'm thinking, hold on, the language is wrong. Okay, so it is called the financial account, all right? And it includes, as we discussed the other day, all of the financial flows, the ownership of assets. So if you're buying a business, so there's Sam and he's going to buy a McDonald's franchise in another country, all right, it comes in here, okay? And the categories that we have very similar to GDP. If you remember back to GDP when we talked about investment, there's different types of investment. There's direct investment, which is where you're looking for ownership and control. You're setting up a factory, you're merging your business with someone, you're buying out an entire business. That's all called direct investment. And typically in GDP, when we talked about it, and if we were to link it with economic development, we would add another word to that and we would call it foreign direct investment, because typically it comes from overseas. And here you've got just the portfolio or financial investment, which is just investing in stocks and shares, just building up your own portfolio. So it's just about earning a return, all right? Just getting the percentage difference or percentage rise in your difference in your interest rates. And if you've been watching interest rates around the world, they're getting pretty low. The Australian Reserve Bank just released its monetary policy with regards to interest rates, and they're down to negative 0.1% in Australia, negative 0.1%, which is quite remarkable when you think about it. And then there's the currency trading as well. Okay, so that all of those speculators that we discussed that could arrive, right, through the exchange rate market, they occur in this account too. So this is your financial account. So if we add the current and the financial account, that gives us our basic balance of payments, which is what we saw back here. Going backwards. Okay, where we saw the current account and then the financial account. All right, and that gives you more or less all that there is in your balance of payments. The capital account here that we're going to have a look at in a minute, which is where the terminology has changed, is a little bit different, and it's very small in comparison. Okay, and remember, we're going to add them together. It'll end up being perhaps a different amount. There will be a positive or a negative amount, and then your, net errors and omissions, and they need to be taken into account as well. All right. So that's the financial account. So you can probably guess what I'm going to ask you to do. No, I'm not. I'm going to go to the capital account. Right, so to explain this, and again, it is a little account. No, that's wrong. I need to delete that one. Ignore that. in that. Ah, darn it, I need to edit the account. Slides, that's okay, ignore that. All right. There is another slide that needs to go in here, all right? And I will get to that, and I'll get you that, all right? In essence, the capital account is those small financial transactions that occur, right, that aren't necessarily accounted for as an investment, right? So the capital account is going to include when you pay for copyright, for example. Hey. All right, so for example, a school might have a musical and they need the copyright to the music. They need to pay a certain amount to America, right? Way it goes. That's a copyright payment, and that will fall inside the capital account. So anytime there are trademarks, anytime there are patents, costs, payments, copyright payments, all of those, they're going to fit into this capital account. So it's very little ones. It's like small gifts of money that you might send to an overseas relative, those sorts of ideas, yeah? So any small financial transaction that isn't a good or a service and that isn't an investment tends to fall into the capital account. But I will put that slide in for you. So ignore that one. Right, example time. All right. I don't think did we do this last time?
No.
No? All right. So here again, here's the words trade balance. All right. And so you need to understand that that's the balance on goods, and here the balance on services. And we're using the UK as a case study. We're using the UK as a case study because it's quite easy. There's a lot of data. The UK's been around for a very long time, and there are some things that stand out with regards to their data. So we have a look here, and we can see what's happened over time. So this sort of table could appear, all right, in your case study, and you're being asked to discuss what's actually happening. Right? So you can see trade balance has gotten worse over time. For goods and services, it's actually more or less gotten better over time, and you'd expect that, and we're going to see that. And the current account has been relatively stable, all right, hovering around 2%, 2 to 3% of GDP over that particular period of time. All right. Why is it so important? Well, again, if we take a case study and we are being evaluative, if we think just about the UK, we know this because we talked about it with regards to macroeconomics, the importance of exports. All right, so the UK, and this is data that may have changed relatively recently, but we'll still use it at this point at any rate. A rise in exports will boost the GDP of the UK, okay, as we would expect, right? Remember aggregate demand, C plus I plus G plus X minus M. So exports in the UK account to 28% of GDP. So over a quarter of all of the income earned in the UK comes from exports. So therefore it is really important and very significant. It's also said here that the UK is the world's second largest exporter of services, with the only country in the world that is bigger with regards to exporting services being the United States. Now, again, the connection then that you have with this case study is Europe and the connection with the UK, because the UK is a very big financial hub. If you've been there, you'll probably have seen it, in London in particular, a huge financial hub for the rest of Europe, right, which is all of those services that we think about. Right, I'm going to skip past that. Okay, so just little examples. Again, it's just about the language and some things to think about. So sometimes we talk about consumer durables, right, being traded. So in an example, if they're talking about durables, they're talking about products that tend to be longer lasting, right? So household goods, motor vehicles, personal computers, things that aren't instantly consumable, all right? Okay, capital goods, so the person-made machines used in production, technology, software, commodities, right? So things like oil and gas, right? Other components, other basic raw materials that go into production, and foodstuffs and beverages. Now, obviously, we've got the issue where the UK is now going to be separating from the EU, so there are going to be some big issues with some of that arises. And again, here we see this is a graphical form, the UK balance of trade in goods, just in goods alone this time. And it is in GDP in billions. If I'm reading that right? Yes, billions. Right, so we can see what happens. Okay, and over time, right, it gets worse over time. Now, it isn't remember being critical about the data, okay, good old TOK stuff. It isn't taking into account the size of the UK economy. And you could make an argument that the UK economy has actually grown over this period of time. So as a percentage, if we were to express this as a percentage, maybe it wouldn't be as bad. But it certainly does look quite bad, okay, when you're looking at it just on a number point of view. Because, I mean, that's up to, it's about 65 billion, right, pounds, which is quite a bit, all right. You can, you know, in our higher level learners, you can think about percentage changes that are occurring over time. All right, if we think about it not in a bar chart, but in a line graph, this is the same idea, but it's finished manufactured goods. So we're a bit more specific with this particular case study, but we are seeing the same trend. All right, that the UK is importing by far more of these products, finished manufactured goods, than it is exporting. All right. All right, and here we go. This is oil. Now, this is an interesting one. There's a bit of a history with this, and we're going to talk about it. You see, in this period in time in the UK's history, the UK was actually an exporter of oil. But over time, that amount has decreased and changed. And then you get to the 2000s, and all of a sudden it drops massively away, and the UK becomes an importer of oil again. So if we compare that to the history, right, up until the mid-1970s, the UK was an importer of oil. Right? Then we remember the 1970s because we've talked about them with regards to inflation and things that happened all around the world, the oil price shocks in particular. So at that time, the UK all of a sudden discovered a whole bunch of oil in a place called the North Sea. And again, if you've been there, you might have seen the North Sea. Right? They put massive big oil rigs in the North Sea, and it turned the UK into a major oil exporter, which gave them huge surpluses into the 1980s, but they have, as you saw in the graph, gradually fallen away and fallen away. They've just basically run out of oil in the North Sea. Right? And so since the 2000s, it's effectively just about gone. And so they are now back to being a major importer of oil. And again, this is a different way to present the same data, right? Balance of trade, but this is selected goods. So there's the oil one, semi-manufactured, food and beverages, and this one here, finished manufactured goods. That was one of the ones that we saw before. Big drop in the finished manufactured goods. So here you could make a wee economic analysis about the types, the makeup of the balance of trade in the UK. And you could talk about how they're still at the moment, even though it is, yeah, probably, right, not exporting really much oil at all at the moment. They're semi-manufactured goods, they seem to be all right. Food and beverages, they are definitely importing quite a bit, but the finished manufactured goods, they're importing a huge number. And again, you can look at the numbers and quote the numbers, particularly if you are looking at this in a paper 3, but also just as general information in a table form or a graph form as a case study. Now, why do we have a trade deficit? And if we're going to consider the UK as our case study in this case, right, then what we're going to do is we're going to split the trade deficit in two, and we're going to talk about the demand side of it. Remember this all the way back to macroeconomics. So we've got a demand side, and then we're going to have a supply side. Under the demand side, so cyclical changes, okay, so following the business cycle, the UK has for quite some time had very strong real GDP growth, and it's just kept going, right? And the closer and closer they get to Europe, the stronger their GDP growth has been, right? And as we know, as a result of that, the income that has been derived from that, the employment that is derived from that, it has led to a big growth in consumer spending, right? UK consumers, because there's more of them employed, they're earning more, they're able to spend more, and a lot of those potentially are going to be imported. Then, of course, the effects of a strong exchange rate. So we remember back to the exchange rate, and we talked about how you could have a strong versus a weak exchange rate and what the effects of that are. Well, part of that is going to have an effect on the trade deficit. They are all considered demand side, and because they're cyclical, they're part of the business cycle, we expect them not to last particularly long. Right? We expect them to perhaps ebb and flow, as it were, with the business cycle. Right, so here you go. First exercise for the morning. Explain some demand side causes of a trade deficit. There you go. All right, so have a go. Explaining a demand side cause of a trade deficit. Right, so have a go. What might some of the demand side causes be of the trade deficit? All right, here we go. Good. Excellent, Gabriel. That's exactly right. Okay. Yeah, you've said it, Andrew. You might need to be a bit clearer as to what it is, but okay. Hey, Harley. All right. That's good, Hoyun. Well done. Good. All right. Okay. Well done. Now, the supply side, the opposite side of the equation, right? These tend to be what we refer to as structural reasons. So part of the actual structure of the economy in and of itself. So here you're talking about capacity. Can the businesses in the UK actually grow? Is there room for economies of scale? All right. There's been a process in the UK for quite some time of de-industrialisation. So they're removed factories, they're moving towards a service-based economy, right? Away from what used to be the UK's specialist, right, industry, right, production, all of those sorts of things that you can remember from history, where the UK was producing pretty much everything, all the big factories that they used to have, they've pretty much all moved away now, and it's very specialised now in services. Right? So therefore we find that process has led to a decline in export of manufactured goods. Inadequate non-price competitiveness, we say that there's a research and development gap. It's supply side, it's all about productivity, it's all about innovation. These aspects of the UK economy aren't currently there, all right? They are less, if you do the productivity tables, less productive than some other countries around the world. All right. And we can also say that there's been a change in the comparative advantage, in the nature of trade in and of itself around the world. And some countries that the UK used to have a comparative advantage over with regards to their production, now those countries have emerged. So we tend to talk about the emerging economies. Those economies have emerged and they now have a comparative advantage. All right. And the UK now has potentially comparative advantages in service-based industries, whereas before they didn't. But big issue with that is the move away from Europe. Okay, the Brexit has led to a number of those service-based industries like banking to perhaps decide to relocate. Right, and a number have actually moved to Germany. Right, so whether that will then have an impact again on their trade deficit, their economy. So what is the supply side? What supply side causes can you see, right, in the UK economy, but they are useful also to think about with regards to other trade deficits as well. There you go. Talk to me later about it, son. Talk to me later about it, son. Talk to me later about it, son. And you need to talk to mum about it. But it needs to be later, son. It's 9 o'clock in the morning. All right, here we go. Supply side causes. Counted 13% of the votes. Biden still in the lead on the electoral map by a reasonable margin, but the actual number of votes is actually in Trump's favour at the moment. So that's a bit scary, but we'll see. I mean, if you remember the last election, it was still only about 30 million or so. So, yeah, we'll see. Right. How we going? Yeah, all right, Andrew. Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's good, Sam. All right, we're in. Yep, so it's deindustrialization, so the removing of the industry, okay, removing of an industry. Okay, that's good. All right, we need to perhaps do a bit more thinking about that supply side. Remember, it's structural, right? So it's about innovation, investment, productivity. It's the heart of what enables your economy to work, all right? It's those sorts of ideas, and they're slightly longer term, all right? That's another issue with them, okay? Because they're not necessarily following the business cycle, and they may take years to actually take an effect. So the deindustrialization that we talked about has actually been happening for decades. A lack of investment has been happening for decades. I mean, they're not the only country, and that's why this is quite useful to have this so that you can then apply it to whichever case study you get. Trade and services. So just, again, just a little bit of a heads up, the sorts of things that could be discussed when we're talking about the trade and services. So the obvious ones, the tourism, aviation, insurance, business consultancy, again, very big in the UK, banking, accountancy, data processing, that's a more modern 21st century industry, okay, information systems, again, 21st century. So that has really only been in like the cloud computing sorts of ideas, those sorts of service-based industries that are very technological have only been around for a few years. So the growth of those is something that will have an impact. If countries cannot take advantage of those, then they possibly will need to outsource that to other countries. Music and entertainment. Remember, America is very big in the entertainment industry. Right, so there's a lot of trade and services that flow into America on the basis just of the entertainment industry alone. I mean, if you have a look at the American economy and see how much of the US GDP is actually generated by California and the entertainment industry that is in California, it's quite a bit. Shipping, so transportation, and of course, education. All right, now here is the UK trade balance for services, and this is illustrating what I was talking about before, how we have seen a massive rise in their export of services, okay? And if you have a look at the dates, all right, now historically they're quite important, right, because the connection with Europe has been happening since the 70s, so we've seen an increase here. And then of course 1999 is when Britain formally, or the UK formally joined the European Union, and whoosh, up go the export of services at that point. And again, higher level learners, you could be looking at percentage changes over time. Could be something that you could discuss. Here is a split of the different types of services. So the one big one that we see that has increased dramatically is the financial services. Not a lot of change in things like royalties and license fees. There's your communications, there's transportation, right? And this one here, travel. Right, this blue line is travel, and you'll notice this one is going down. It's decreasing. It's in the negatives. So that suggests that the UK, because this is still a case study of the UK, is a net importer of travel services. All right, whereas they are a net exporter of financial services. So why do you think that there's been this massive rise in travel? Or can you give me two reasons, just two, why you think, so you can speak it why you think there's been a big rise in tourism from the UK. So they are engaging in tourism outside of the UK. What's happened?
Maybe they have like more free time.
Maybe. Okay, so the idea of the structural change in the economy to a service-based, so they may have a bit more time to go traveling. Yes, that's an idea. You could make an argument about, remote working like we're kind of doing now. So therefore they can travel and still do their job potentially. Yes, that's an argument. What else could you say? Two quite big ones. You might remember the historical thing that I said happened around here. What happened for the UK in 1999?
Join the EU.
They joined the EU. And what do you see happening to the amount of travel after that point?
It increased.
Increased. Dramatically so. I mean, look at these. Look at this. All right, that's a lot. So, and it's access to Europe. It's now you'll find the British tourists will be traveling to Spain, and they'll be traveling to Italy, and they'll be traveling to Germany, and these sorts of places. Whereas before they possibly wouldn't have. Right? They might have been traveling internally, but now they're going external. All right? So then the UK has become a net importer of travel services. Good. You could also make an argument about the rise in income that has been able to be generated in the UK, so they can now afford more luxury end products like travel. So that would be another argument as well. All right, so when you see the data, you need to be able to work out why it is, what it is doing, maybe a comparison over time, okay? So percentage changes, you might need to discuss what implication that then has. So if there is more service-based industries, there is less manufactured-based industries. There's the possibility of remote working, as said. There's the possibility of higher incomes able to be earned. Those higher incomes can then afford more luxury products. One of those luxury products, international travel. All right, now, here's what I'd like you to do. And you need to do this. This is you. And look, there you are. What a team. All right, what a team. What I'd like you to do is to create a shared Google Doc amongst yourself, all right, selves, and you're going to add in some real life balance of payments information, all right? So find some countries, all right, give you, because, each person does it perhaps a different country, so you can find different amounts and different types of information specific to the balance of payments, like what you saw that I had there. Right, so about the different types of manufactured goods and the balance of goods, or the different types of services and the balance of services, what's happened over time to that, so that you've got these case studies. Because remember, real life application, right, helps with your understanding, okay, but it also helps when you are able to include it into an example in an exam. Right, then the examiner goes, aha, they've included a real life example. Fantastic, brilliant. And this also links, remember, to macro, okay, because these are going to affect positively or negatively, depending on your view, the macro economy. So therefore, you could still include some of these real life examples into the macroeconomic case studies, right, that you need to do. So it can fit in there too. Now, a few years back, sorry, I'm jumping trains of thought. A few years back, the big case study that the learners all did was the Three Gorges Dam in China, and the building, the development of that particular dam. And the reason why they did that was because it connected with macroeconomics, right? It connected with international trade, and it connected with economic development. And that idea of one case study that you can then apply to multiple different topics and create that synergy is a really useful thing to have. You all don't necessarily have the economic development because you're going to be focusing on international trade, but there are still a lot of links, as you saw, exports and GDP, etc., to macroeconomics. All right, and obviously your fiscal and your monetary policies are going to have implications with regards to exchange rates, the structure of the economy, etc. So therefore, that will still have an effect on your balance of payments. So that's what I'd like you to do. I'd like you to spend about maybe up to about 20 minutes doing that. And also then your next task is preparation for your IA day, which is tomorrow, right? And any particular questions you might have. And the next part is doing some generalized revision for your mock exams, which are going to come around really quickly. All right, so I'm going to stop the sharing, jump back to the meet. There you all are. Now, so that's what I want, okay? So real life case studies, okay, of balance of payments, the structural change, etc., that has occurred potentially within different countries. You can choose different countries amongst yourselves. Have that as a shared doc, so you all do it. So you're reducing your workload by a tremendous amount, and you're also giving yourself all this extra data that you can then add into your revision and into your exam answers. So you've got that, you've got preparation for your IA. That might only take you about 10 minutes just to gather everything together that you need. And then generalized revision, probably another 10 to 20 minutes, just focusing on one particular aspect, say market failure, or one particular aspect of higher level learners, different market structures, focusing on one aspect of fiscal policy, one aspect of monetary policy, and just reviewing that, okay? Otherwise, if you have any particular questions, you can ask, you can send emails, etc. And otherwise, we'll see you tomorrow. So as we'd say in the land of my birth, hei kōrera, which means goodbye for now.
Wait,
Thank you,
before
Mr. David.
Thank you.
anyone goes, who wants to make the document and share it with us?
I'll make it.
Okay, thank you. Okay, see you, Mr. David.
See you.
Thank
All right, thanks, Mr. David. See you.
See
Yeah.
you. Bye.
Mr. David,
Yeah.
can I check if my article for the third commentary is okay?
Yes.
Oh yeah, because I might do that for tomorrow's lesson.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.